Lisa, tied the knot last year with Harry, my boyfriend of 3 years. We first met on social media. It all began when Harry, a friend of a friend, liked a photo of me and started following me. He's 2 years younger and works as a software engineer. Though he's in tech, he's also a great communicator and seemed to be recognized as a rising star at his company. On our second anniversary, Harry proposed. It was a truly simple proposal. At our favorite local Italian restaurant, just before dessert, he began, "I have something to say." Curious, I waited, and then he said, "Will you marry me?" presenting a ring. It was a straightforward proposal, but it deeply moved me. Of course, I immediately replied, "Yes, I'd love to." Later, I learned from Harry that before we even started dating, during a casual drink with friends, the topic of ideal proposals came up. I had mentioned wanting something simple, and he remembered it all along. Afterwards, we held our engagement party at a hotel in New York. That's when I first met Harry's family. He has his parents and an older sister, who's 6 years his senior and was also planning to get married soon. Harry, standing at 5'6", is on the shorter side for a guy. His entire family is also quite petite. On the other hand, I'm tall for a woman at 5'5". My mom, a former model, is even an inch taller than me, and my dad stands tall at 5'10". I couldn't help but feel a bit concerned about our height differences. I've always been attracted to shorter guys, usually around 5'3". Conversely, Harry has a thing for taller women. So we were a perfect match in that sense. Our engagement party, however, lacked a certain spark. Later, I found out that Harry's mother and sister had been criticizing my family and me. After that meeting, we got married in August, 3 months later. Instead of a lavish ceremony, we just wanted a casual, fun gathering with friends. So, we simply held a wedding announcement party. This didn't sit well with Harry's mother and sister. When we visited Harry's family home after the wedding, they openly showed their displeasure. It was summer and I wore a yellow floral sleeveless dress with heeled sandals. They began, "Could you not wear something like that to someone's house?" "I'm so sorry, I'll go change right away." Feeling I'd made a mistake, I rushed home to change. When I returned, Harry's mother criticized the bound cushion cake I brought. "Who wants to eat such a thing in this heat? Normally people bring cooler-looking, refreshing desserts, don't they?" I had chosen the bound cushion because it's delicious when chilled. "You really don't think things through. I guess your model mother couldn't teach you better. Just because you have a small face doesn't mean you have a big brain. Looks aren't everything, especially in our family. We value consideration, not like your family that only cares about appearances." I was shocked to hear them speak about my mother and father this way. I looked to Harry for support, but he seemed lost in thought. On our way home, Harry began, "About what my mom and sister said earlier?" "Yeah?" "I never expected them to act like that. They had made some comments after the engagement party, but I thought they'd come around. I'm really sorry." "It's okay. We'll get to know each other better over time." "Probably."
Yeah, but I never thought they'd be like that. I was naive.
Don't worry about it. Accepting someone new into the family can be challenging. At that time, knowing Harry cared was enough for me. I don't want to be taken advantage of by someone else, and I just need to take the time to build a relationship of trust. One day, Harry's sister messaged him, saying she and her husband wanted to visit our home. So, on a Saturday afternoon, they were scheduled to come over.
I have to work this Saturday. Can you handle them alone?
Harry had asked his sister to reschedule, but she insisted on that day. Yeah, I'll take care of everything. And so, on Saturday, Harry's sister and her husband arrived. Please make yourselves at home.
We're here to see if you're living properly.
After I quickly cleared the tea and cake, my sister-in-law said, All right, let's see your place, and hurried off to the bedroom. To my shock, she started opening my closet without asking. Please don't go through my closet without permission.
Why not? I came to see if you're living properly. Who knows? Maybe you just shove everything in there without cleaning.
That's not true. Then she began taking pictures of the closet's contents with her phone. Hey, what are you doing? Don't take pictures without asking.
My mom asked me to. She wanted photos.
It was so rude. She checked every drawer, even commenting on the color of my underwear, took pictures of the dresser's contents, the bathroom cabinet, and even under the kitchen sink. She meticulously photographed the living room cabinet where we keep our valuables. No matter how many times I asked her to stop, she continued taking pictures throughout the house. In the living room, she noticed our high-end brand TV, a gift from my parents, and remarked with a hint of disdain, You have a pretty nice TV. She then snapped a photo and said to her husband, who had been silently following her, We need to step up our game. That night, after my husband returned from work, I told him everything. I couldn't help but cry a little.
We might need to set some boundaries. My dad has been giving me some intel too.
Really?
Just wait and see.
In April, it had been 5 years since my husband's grandmother passed away, so there was a family gathering. Since we didn't have a wedding, this was my first time meeting my husband's extended family. His family originally moved from Atlanta, and the gathering was held there. Of course, most of the relatives live in Atlanta. The gathering was overwhelming. There were so many relatives and it was hard to remember everyone. My mother-in-law, probably on purpose, didn't introduce me to anyone. I asked my husband to introduce me. However, everyone seemed to sense the tension and their reactions were lukewarm at best. My sister-in-law, trying to show off, deliberately chatted happily with the relatives in front of me. When I looked lost, she swooped in and said,
She's so clueless. All she cares about is her looks.
Come on, help out. My mother-in-law joined in, treating me as the clueless daughter-in-law. Time passed and my relationship with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed no signs of improving. One day, in early fall, my mother-in-law suggested a family trip. She wanted to go to Boston since the Acela Express passed through there. Everyone agreed, and it was decided that my father-in-law, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, husband, and I would go. My brother-in-law couldn't join due to work. I was looking forward to the trip in September, when the weather was cooler. However, I was worried about being harassed by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law during the trip. But this time, my husband would be with me. I had never been to Boston, so I was excited. We planned to use a long weekend for the trip. On the day, while my husband and father-in-law were buying snacks, my mother-in-law suddenly said,
"Oh no, I think I left my glasses at the cafe we were at earlier." "The cafe upstairs?" "Yes. Can you go get them?"
Which store is that?"
"Isn't there an area on the second floor where there are several stores lined up? It's a self-service cafe over there."
"But our train is leaving soon, isn't it?"
"That's why I'm asking you to hurry."
"But do you expect me to go through the trip without my glasses?"
"I didn't mean—" "Just go!"
Reluctantly, I ran off to find her glasses. There's no way I'd make it back in time for the train. I ran as fast as I could.
"We've got the snacks. Let's hurry." "Let's go."
"Where's Lisa?"
"She said she needed the restroom and went ahead."
"All right, let's hurry then."
By the time I returned from the cafe on the second floor, having confirmed there were no forgotten glasses, the Ursula Express had already departed. I knew it. From the start, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had planned to leave me behind. On second thoughts, as I was processing this, my mother-in-law called.
"We've already left,"
she said, her voice dripping with glee. But I retorted,
"Yes, I'm aware. Take care."
"What?
What did she say?"
From the other end, I could hear my sister-in-law.
"She's acting tough, saying take care or something. Poor thing, left behind and still trying to act strong."
Just before the call ended, I overheard my husband and father-in-law saying they were going to the restroom. About 20 minutes later, the Ursula Express arrived at New London Station.
"Where are the guys? They're taking a while."
"Maybe they stopped for a beer." In reality, my husband and father-in-law had gotten off the train. Unbeknownst to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they returned to Metro Park Station, paid for round-trip tickets, and met up with me. Our real destination for this trip was Washington, D.C. My father-in-law had informed me of the scheme my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had planned. He was furious at their constant harassment. He once confronted them, saying,
"Enough of this nonsense. Lisa is a good person and important to Harry."
But they dismissed it.
"Dad, you're just blinded by her looks. Men are so easily deceived."
They didn't even try to listen to their father-in-law's opinion. Their ill intentions continued, and my father-in-law decided a harsh lesson was needed. So, he and my husband hatched a plan to leave them behind instead. On the contrary, my plan is to leave my mother-in-law and sister-in-law behind. Thus, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were left on the Ursula Express, likely not realizing until they reached Boston. They probably didn't bring much money, expecting my father-in-law to cover all expenses. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were in for a tough time. They had no hotel to stay in. My husband had taken care of the travel arrangements, and he had canceled the Boston hotel reservation the day after booking it. With little cash on hand, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were definitely in a bind.
"They won't get it unless we teach them a lesson like this," They're adults. They'll find their way back somehow.
My father-in-law, my husband, and I enjoyed some snacks we just bought on the Acela Express heading to Washington. Yes, the two of them going to buy snacks was actually part of our plan. We arrived in Washington before evening. Throughout the journey, there were several messages from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law to my father-in-law and husband, but both of them ignored them completely. The three of us thoroughly enjoyed Washington.
It's more fun without those two. I was trying not to say that.
Both Harry and my father-in-law were in high spirits, making such comments. We had a relaxed trip without cramming too much sightseeing. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who were left behind on the Acela Express, they got off at Boston South Station and waited for my father-in-law and husband, but they never showed up. They realized something was off, but it was too late. They frantically messaged my father-in-law and husband, but there was no response since they had decided to ignore them. They finally realized they had been left behind and headed to the hotel. But the hotel reservation had been canceled the day before. They went to the nearest restaurant and checked how much money they had. Both had relied on my father-in-law's wallet during the trip, so they hardly had any cash and didn't even bring credit cards. Together, they had about $150, just enough for a cheap hotel and a late-night bus ride home. But they couldn't even have a decent meal. They tried to book a bus for that night, but it was already full. So, they reluctantly booked a bus for the next night. For about a day and a half, they couldn't eat properly. They shared a biscuit they bought at the station. They kept messaging my father-in-law and husband, but of course, there was no reply. It seemed like my mother-in-law and sister-in-law no longer had the energy to bother me. For dinner, they bought cereal at a grocery store and ate it in their hotel room.
Mom, what's going on?
I don't know. Isn't it your father's doing? Who's the mastermind?
But this is too much, isn't it?
The next day, they went without food or drink and waited until night to board the bus. Apparently, I had a ton of messages and missed calls from them. I had blocked them, so I only noticed later. The next morning, the bus arrived in New York. They slept until the evening. By the time they woke up, my father-in-law, my husband, and I had returned from Washington. I went back to our apartment first, and my husband went to his parents' house with his father. We knew from messages that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had somehow made it back. As soon as they got home, they confronted my father-in-law and husband. My husband and I were on standby, called by my father-in-law.
What's the meaning of this? We had very little cash and went through so much.
We did it because you two planned to leave Jamie behind. So, Harry and I plan to leave you two behind.
But that's cruel. It's her fault.
She pointed at me. I wasn't sure how to react, so I just smiled.
I am so pissed. Stop smiling.
My sister-in-law threw her bottled tea at me, but my father-in-law deflected it with a chop and it hit my mother-in-law's forehead.
Ouch!
I struggled to hold back my laughter.
Haven't you two learned your lesson?
My father-in-law shouted.
Mom, sis, stop this. It's embarrassing.
My husband laughed.
What's embarrassing? She's the embarrassing one.
Enough. If you keep this up, I'll divorce you.
What?
Divorce?
My mother-in-law turned pale.
Sis, Mom, just stop, or I'll get really mad.
The word divorce completely demoralized my sister-in-law and mother-in-law.
It's because of you two that this happened. Just accept it.
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law finally broke down in tears. Father, Harry, it seems they're truly remorseful. Please forgive them. I never wanted things to end this way. Please, I beg you. I pleaded with my father-in-law and husband.
Jamie, we're so sorry.
And there, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law vowed never to harass me again and apologized for everything they had done. Thanks to me, talks of divorce and disownment were off the table. Little did they know, this was all part of my plan. The one who seemed the most excited when we hatched this plan was my father-in-law. But that's a secret. Half a year has passed since then. Recently, both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have started treating me normally. Now, the three of us even go shopping and visit cafes together. I finally felt accepted as a part of the family. Next year, I hope to go on a Boston trip with the entire family. This time, without any hitches.